Hello everyone, I'm PapaKenn and welcome to episode 83 of Discovering Doctor Who. Today, the episode I'm going to be talking about is Nightmare in Silver. And if you watched the previous episode, I mentioned that, based on the small, very short segment of the previews that I did catch, it looked like it had some promise. And, well, I'll let you know what my overall thoughts were, of course, at the end, though I'm sure you'll be able to figure out what I think of it before the end of this episode. So let's get started with my favorite parts, which, starting with number one, Neil Gaiman as the writer. Now, I have noticed in a lot of regards that sometimes people's opinions of an episode are kind of based around who wrote the episode, and I can understand that to a point. It's like you can definitely understand or get a feel for how an episode is going to be, or sort of the overall themes that will be used based on the writer. But I don't like to completely discount an episode just because of who wrote it, because, well, starting back when I first started the show, the first few episodes that were written by Russell T Davies, I didn't care for them. And then it's like, as it continued, it's like, some of the later episodes would be like, okay, well, Russell T wrote this one, so I would find out afterward and I would, figure, oh, well, that explains it. But then later, as it went along, the episodes he wrote started to get better and better. So, I don't know, I don't want to completely discount someone just because I may not enjoy them or may not enjoy their style as a writer. But with Neil Gaiman, to bring this full circle, it's very rare that he falls short as far as, story writing goes. Like, I can't really think, personally, of anything that I've read or a show that I've seen where it's like, he wrote the script where it hasn't come off rather well. Like, usually the flaws come down to the actors or possibly the director, but the story itself, sorry, had a hair in my mouth, gross. But the story itself usually tends to be really strong, again, because of Neil Gaiman. So while I don't want to discount stories or episodes because of who the writer is, I can usually expect that if it's written by someone like Neil Gaiman, that it's going to be good. That usually it's a surprise if the episode isn't enjoyable overall. So yeah, Neil Gaiman as author, or scriptwriter for this episode, number one favorite. Now moving on, my second favorite part of this episode was Warwick Davis as Porridge. And for those of you that may not know, Warwick Davis, he is a short person. I can't think of the proper term these days. But basically, the role I know him best in is Willow from the movie from I think it was the 80s. It was basically like a sort of attempt at looking like Lord of the Rings, but never quite matched up. But to this day, I still enjoy that movie, though I haven't seen it in like 10 years. I might have to change that. But basically, that's the role I know him best in. In fact, when me and Jill were watching this episode, she noticed that, like, off the bat. I didn't even, connect the dots and realize, oh my god, that's Willow. She basically said, hey, that's Willow. That's the person that plays Willow. So, I just thought that was really cool. And he does a really good job as the character as well. He's, again, I haven't seen a lot of his roles, but he's obviously a good actor. Just based on the few that I have seen, I really enjoy him overall. I'll have to see some more of his body of work just to get a feel for how good he can be, because I honestly think that he's a good actor, and, this episode just kind of helps solidify that. Alright, so moving on, my third favorite part of this episode were the Cybermites. Now, this is just a really simple reason. I liked the design. The computer graphics done to create them were really nice. The little, physical figurines that the Doctor handled looked very, comparable to the computer graphics and vice versa. And just the fact that they went from the Cybermats, which are, while not huge, relatively big, to these little tiny Cybermites that, basically they work so much more efficiently as sort of like little probes for the Cybermen. I just thought it was really brilliant. I thought it was a really cool design. And again, I just really liked how both the CG and the physical figures, looked similar, and it was pretty seamless in my opinion. Now, if you're really into computer graphics and everything, you probably can notice all the differences, but I can't. So yeah, I really like them. Moving on, my fourth favorite part of this episode was a return of the true Cybermen. Or at least from what I can tell. It's like it's not the Cybermen from way early when I started this show. It's more of a return of, I guess, the Cybermen that made an appearance during A Good Man Goes to War, I assume, although obviously a much bigger threat. Because those Cybermen didn't seem to pose much of a threat and were easily destroyed by the Doctor and Rory, I assume. But yeah, I really enjoyed how they brought them back in this episode, and subsequently, got rid of them again. But I mean, they were very intimidating in this episode. They seemed like a true threat. Possibly even more so when there was only one of them, or a very few of them, that were seemingly active at the time. But yeah, I just really enjoyed them overall, and they definitely had that threatening aspect that I kind of felt there the first time that I saw the Cybermen in Doctor Who, but even kind of beyond that in a way. But yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit more as we go along in this episode. My number 5 favorite part of Nightmare in Silver, and this is another simple one, the Tiberian Spiral Galaxy, or basically the graphic that they used and the story that went along with it to explain. Basically, I mean, we see this, a beautiful swirling area in space, but then there's this big black hole in the middle, and it's because in order to fight the Cybermen in a way that couldn't be adapted to, they had to destroy the planets. That entire galaxy was just gone because of everything that had to be done by the normal humans, and I assume other species, that were fighting the Cybermen. So I found the image itself to be beautiful in a sad way, but then also the story that went along with it I just thought was really interesting, because, I mean, when it boils down to it, the Cybermen were a species that just simply couldn't be fought efficiently because they kept adapting or upgrading themselves to match the weapons that the humans were using against them. So yeah, I just thought that was really cool. Now moving on, my 6th favorite part of this episode was Clara. Now I know this has been a bit of a running theme overall in the last few episodes, but when Clara takes charge, even when she's not in charge, but just in general, we definitely saw the classic Clara here. I feel like this story is penned by Neil Gaiman. He may have been writing this for the old Clara, or it's the original Clara that we met, possibly expecting her to be, the companion that we have now. But, regardless of whether that's the fact or not, it's we definitely got a good chunk of the classic Clara here. It's that personality, or at least the current Clara developing into that more confident, strong person, because she definitely lets it shine through. I mean, she's thrown into the middle of an area where she's all of a sudden in charge of this, what they call it, punishment platoon. And, I mean, she does an excellent job. She stands her ground. So yeah, I really, really like that. And I thought, Clara and Jenna Coleman, the actress, did a great job in this episode. So yeah, really well done, and I'm honestly coming to like the character more as she's being developed. Now, we're not seeing true character development, I feel. It almost just feels like the old is spilling into the new, in a way. But the development that we are getting, I'm enjoying. So yeah. Now, moving on, is it my 7th? Yes. My 7th and final favorite part of this episode, Matt Smith's acting. Particularly when the cyber planner / Mr. Clever, Mr. Clever, came into being, and it became a dual personality type deal. Now, I don't know if all of you know this, but my favorite character in the Lord of the Rings movies is Gollum. He's just my favorite for, a lot of reasons. Obviously, he's a bad guy, but there's just something so intriguing about the character. And just the way Matt Smith did the dual personalities back and forth, I just thought was absolutely brilliant. Honestly, and I'm sure people will be able to argue other episodes on this, but I feel like this episode may have been some of his best acting, because he literally did 2 separate characters as one person. Now, obviously, it wasn't as intriguing when we saw the inside of his mind. It's it's a little mind space where it's, literally like an image of Matt Smith and an image of Matt Smith talking back and forth at each other. Although that was really well done. I like the way that was written. And the mind space was really cool too. I just thought it was really well designed overall. But the acting back and forth, when it would literally just be the camera switching back and forth, or the Doctor getting an electric shock and jumping back and forth and talking with himself, I just thought it was absolutely brilliant and really well done. And again, just some brilliant acting from Matt Smith. So yeah, that is, I would say Neil Gaiman as writer is my second favorite part of this episode, with Matt Smith's acting being a definite number one, like the absolute favorite part of this entire episode. Now, as you may notice, I really have some strong points as far as favoritism goes for this episode, but there are some issues that I want to touch on. So let's get into my annoyances with this episode. Starting with the sudden super speed of a Cyberman. And it's not something that is redone later in the episode. It's just when the platoon sees the Cybermen and it starts coming after, what's her name? Angie. Or it takes Angie away. And all of a sudden we go into this Matrix slow-mo session, and the Cyberman is like zooming forward really quick. And that isn't done at all. Like, as far as I can remember, I don't think that has happened before, as far as the Cybermen go. And it wasn't done after within the same episode. And it just seems to me like that is the true fear that a person could have for the Cybermen. Like, that was the true threatening aspect. That oh my god, all of a sudden they're super speed? Like, they can just go buy blasters if they want to? But then they didn't follow up on that. It's like, when the big army of Cybermen were going, there was no super speed. Even when it was still just that one or maybe a few Cybermen that were active, it wasn't done again. It was just like, the soldiers were surprised occasionally, but it was just your regular, like, slow stomping Cybermen. I mean, obviously you can't do that, otherwise no one would have survived, so I'm sure there's some explanation, but just the fact that there's this sudden burst of super speed that is no longer visited upon the rest of the episode or even explained, I just thought was really, really strange. So if it has been done elsewhere and I just don't remember, or if it's explained anywhere, please do let me know. That'd be really interesting to find out what all went into that. Or if it was just, a bit of a writing issue on the fact of Neil Gaiman. It's like, no one's perfect. But yeah, it's just, I thought that was really, really strange. Now moving on, my second favorite part of this, my second annoyance with this episode. And I honestly feel like it was the biggest issue I had with the episode overall, as much as I hate to say it, but Angie and Artie's acting. Mostly Angie. Yeah, the kid's acting just wasn't good. The kid Artie, you could tell he was putting some effort into it, and so not all of his scenes were really infuriating or anything, but just neither of them did that great of a job. And especially the girl that played Angie. And again, I hate to say this because I'm sure they were both putting a lot into their performances, but I couldn't fully enjoy whenever they were on screen, particularly because it seemed like they were trying to give the girl a catchphrase of sorts because everything was stupid. I don't know, it just, and that may just be the teenager mindset. I don't know, I'm 30 years old, almost 31, I haven't been a teenager for a long time. But yeah, it just kind of drove me crazy. It's like, again, not all of the scenes. There were some scenes that were, pretty well done overall. It wasn't scenes that had to rest entirely on the kid's shoulders, obviously. But yeah, just the kids on their own, just overall, they weren't acted properly, in my opinion, or they weren't done very well. So yeah, that was probably the biggest issue I had with this episode, was the kids and their acting, unfortunately to say. But moving on, my third and final annoyance with this episode. And this one I definitely boil down to a plot hole, possibly more of a nitpick, but in the end it seems like literally no one had to die. Like, in the end, because of delaying the planet exploding, or imploding, which was, I guess, kind of another slight annoyance. Like, it seems like it exploded, didn't implode, but whatever. Okay, so when the king, the emperor, put in his code, everyone was transported up, except for the Cybermen. Everyone was transported up to his ship, and they all survived. So, if all that was needed in order to get rid of the Cybermen was explode the planet with him doing it, why didn't he do that in the first place? Now, obviously, it would have made for a much shorter episode, but my God, it's like, by waiting, he now has blood on his hands, as opposed to, oh, by the way, I'm the Emperor, I could have put in my code, and instead of just the entire planet being destroyed, and all of us dying on it, had the captain done it, I can put in the code, get rid of the Cybermen, and we all survive. Yeah, actually, maybe that's more of an annoyance than I thought it was when I first thought about it. Yeah, so, I don't know, it's kind of a nitpick in the way, but on the other hand, it's a definite plot hole that is kind of annoying me a little bit more and more as it goes along. So yeah, yeah, that's just really annoying. But anyway, moving on from there, let me know what some of your favorite parts of this episode were, what some of your annoyances were, and since there seems to be one or two of you that kind of hate the episodes because of Clara in general, tell me if for some reason you do just hate this episode, I want you to give me at least one favorite aspect of this episode. Yes, a favorite, not just something good, but something you loved about this episode, because there has to be something. And yeah, just give me one. That's all I want. Alright, but again, I'm not trying to pick on anyone, I'm just having a little bit of fun. But moving on, actually I do have a couple of segments that kind of boil down to the, well, that happened. Yeah, there's more than one this time. The first of which were the incompetent soldiers. Now, I get it that this was a punishment platoon, but what bothered me was it wasn't just people that, were possibly just, that their actions, like they disobeyed orders or their actions went against that of the Imperial Guard or Army, whatever they were. But it seemed like they just had literally useless people in the platoon, like completely inept soldiers. Which, of course, since it's an empire, it may be one of those deals where, everyone has to join the army at some point. That might have been the logic that went into it. I don't know for sure. But it just seemed to me like for a punishment platoon, it was just kind of a inept platoon. Because there were, like, especially the first girl that, or the first soldier that gets taken out, she, well, obviously you would be scared of the Cybermen, but it seemed like she didn't know what she was doing. It's like she raises her gun and, don't do anything, I'm in the army, or I'll shoot, I'm in the army. It's something along those lines, and it just, I don't know, it's like even if you're scared, it just seemed like she had no idea what she was doing at all. And for it to be a punishment platoon, it seems like they would have had to have been in the army long enough for it to be, for them to have anything worthy of being punished for other than just being inept. I don't know. Like, again, if it boils down to just where it's an empire, everyone had to be part of the army, then I guess I can understand that. But just, it doesn't seem like at least the majority of the people in that platoon would have willingly chosen to be part of the army. So yeah, that happened. Now my second, well, that happened, was one of the Doctor's final lines at the end of the episode, and I actually had to watch it twice because I thought maybe I just didn't hear it correctly. But yeah, one of his final lines when he's after Clara leaves the TARDIS, he basically, he goes on his little quote, and part of it says, "Squeezed into a skirt that's just a little bit too tight." And he has this, like, really pervy look on his face, and I can't tell if that's implied to mean like he's all of a sudden starting to, take a physical liking, shall we say, to Clara, or what. But it just felt so out of place. Like, had that line been executed and just, like, went straight, it's like, in a skirt that's a little bit too tight, and then he shakes his head and, realizes he's being silly or something. But the way that they zoomed in on his face, and it got kind of pervy, and he slowed down his speech, it just, I don't know, it sat strangely with me. But it's not something particularly that annoyed me with the episode because it was just kind of here then gone. It was just something that felt a bit off, I guess. And again, it just seemed like maybe it was meant to imply something differently. It's like, something that, seems a little bit more just regular for the Doctor, but it came off as sort of out of character. So yeah, again, as the segment is called, that happened. Alright, so, moving on from there, it's time to get to my track of the episode, and finally, like, instead of just getting a small handful like the previous episode did, as far as the official soundtrack goes, we got quite a few tracks to choose from. Most of them very short, but a few that were a bit longer. And after listening through a few times, I have to say that my favorite track of this episode would be The Emperor's Wife. And for me, it's just because while all the music was really good, some of it was kind of boiled down to ambient noise almost as background noise. But the track, the Emperor's Wife, it just stands out from the others so much. It's a really well done track, like just beautiful. It's very dynamic too. It's like it sort of goes back and forth from just this beauty to very serious and back to beauty. It's just, I really loved it. So let me know what some of your all's favorite track was for this episode. Again, it's like my personal opinion. I think that was the best one by far. So yeah, let me know. Well, moving on from there, it is time to talk about my quote of the episode. And this is thankfully an episode, and with it being written by Neil Gaiman, I kind of expected this, but it had quite a few quotable lines. And it boiled down to a few that were a bit difficult for me to choose from. But the one that absolutely stood out the most, it was a conversation between Clara and the captain, basically when they approached the castle, or whatever it was in the amusement park. And Clara turns around and says this: "The only reason I'm still alive is because I do what the doctor says. Can you guarantee me you'd bring me back my children alive and unharmed?" "I trust the doctor," Captain says. "You think he knows what he's doing?" "I'm not sure I'd go that far." That just, again, the acting that Jenna Coleman put into that, just like, the little side glance when she says that, and the line is just executed so well. Just that line cracked me up, it blew me away, and it was really strong too. And once again, it brings out some of that old Clara, I guess you would say. It's like, the old Clara coming to become part of the new Clara. I really look forward to when I'm not going to have to say it like that anymore, when we finally figure out, or when I finally figure out what's going on here. I mean, nothing new as far as the theory goes, and before I even get to my overall thoughts, I'm not actually doing a poem for this episode because it's rather lengthy, and I feel like it would make the episode go on a bit longer than it needs to. But the poem that was in there, I will put in text in the description down below, because I really did find it to be pretty cool. It's just a bit longer, and I feel like it would have taken the episode on a bit longer than I want it to be. But moving on, let's get into my overall final thoughts of the episode, and I'm just going to say it. This is the best episode of the second half of Season 7, or Series 7, that has been so far. Part of that has to do, I'm sure, with Neil Gaiman being the writer, but I don't know, it just felt like it grasped part of what made me love Doctor Who from the beginning. It's like it was really well written, overall well acted, had some strong characters, it had some weak characters, which even... it's obvious. It's like, I kind of prefer the Russell T Davies era overall. But it's like, even the best episodes I loved had some acting at times. So it's like, the kids aspect is forgivable. There's always some sort of plot holes. Well, not always, but usually some form of plot holes. But despite the annoyances that I do have, I mean, it was just a really good episode, and one that I enjoyed overall. And one that honestly blew me away when I looked at the IMDb page. Like, it's ranked at a 7.4, and I don't know, maybe some people found the annoyances to be stronger than I did, but I don't think it deserves that low of a score. Like, I think it's actually, that actually scores it lower than some of the other episodes in the second half of the season that I thought were not so good. Now, obviously, all that boils down to personal opinion, but yeah, I honestly thought that this was the strongest episode of possibly the season so far, maybe not the entire season, but definitely the second half. But yeah, everyone, let me know your overall thoughts on the episode. Let me know what you're looking forward to the most as we approach the Blank of the Doctor episodes, which I'm going to be doing my best to get those reaction videos out to you, and the live reaction is still planned for the Day of the Doctor, and possibly like the prequel minisodes that go along with it as well. Just have to make sure my computer can handle it. But yeah, everyone, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Doctor Who, and next time will be The Name of the Doctor, the final episode of Season 7, or Series 7, and apparently, again, I try to stop the episode as soon as I can, but I think we might have a return of River Song, possibly? Could be. I wouldn't consider that a spoiler if she is in the episode or not, but yeah, it's cool to see her back again. And interested to see how her and Clara will interact together. Yeah. Anyway, all right, everyone, have a great day, and I will see you next time on the next Discovering Doctor Who. Until then, Alonzi!